Before we dive into the first part, I want you to sit with this thought. What if the silence you're getting from someone isn't an absence, but a message? What if their distance is the clarity you've been avoiding? In Stoic philosophy, we're taught to observe reality, not as we wish it to be, but as it is, to stop chasing illusions, to stop dressing up disappointment with hope, and instead, to see people, situations, and relationships for what they reveal, not just what they say. When someone consistently ignores your worth, minimizes your presence, or responds to your authenticity with apathy, the Stoics wouldn't tell you to fight for their attention. They'd tell you to pay attention. Because not every disconnect is an accident. Sometimes, it's a quiet form of truth. So in this first part, we're going to look at what indifference really means, and why learning to see it clearly might be the first step in reclaiming your power. Part 1. Let their indifference teach you who they are. Let's start with something most people overlook, not because it's invisible, but because it hurts to admit. When someone ignores your worth, it's not always loud, it's not always cruel. Sometimes, it's quiet, it's the unanswered message, the cancelled plan, the subtle shift in tone. And it cuts not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. The silence becomes the story. And deep down, you already know what it means. But here's the truth. When someone shows indifference to who you are, they are showing you who they are. Let that sink in. Their silence is not a mystery to solve. It's not a puzzle you need to overanalyze. It's a message, a mirror, a moment of clarity, if you're willing to see it for what it is, not for what you hoped it might be. You see, we're taught to fight for connection, to reach out, to explain ourselves, to prove our value to someone who can't or won't see it. We think if we just try harder, care more, say the right thing, we'll get the recognition, the love, the attention we deserve. But the Stoics would tell you this. Recognition from others is never the goal. Self-respect is, and no amount of chasing validation will fill the emptiness created by someone else's refusal to value you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And what that means here is simple. Don't match their indifference with self-doubt. Don't internalize their neglect as proof that you're not enough. Because you are. You've always been. Their inability to see it says more about their lens than your light. I've been there. I've felt the sting of someone slowly drifting away. Their enthusiasm cooling. Their energy fading. And I made the mistake so many people make. I chased. I reached. I tried to make sense of the shift. But all I was doing was delaying the lesson. That not everyone will see you. And that's okay. What matters more is whether you choose to keep seeing yourself. Indifference is painful because it creates space for self-doubt to echo. It makes you wonder what you did wrong, when sometimes, you didn't do anything wrong at all. Sometimes people leave, sometimes they withdraw, sometimes they stop choosing you, and it has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their capacity. So instead of chasing, observe, watch how they show up. Notice what they prioritize. Pay attention to how they respond when you stop overgiving. Their indifference is data. Use it. Don't explain it away. Don't soften it to protect your hope. Accept it, because once you accept it, you can make a decision rooted in truth, not fantasy. Let their silence teach you. Let their distance clarify. Let their lack of presence redirect your energy back to yourself. You don't need to be angry. You don't need to create closure through confrontation. Sometimes, the clearest message is no message at all. The next time someone ignores your worth, don't plead for their attention. Don't perform for their affection. Just breathe, step back, and observe, because when you stop chasing indifference, you start moving in the direction of people who won't need to be convinced. And that, my friend, is where your power begins to return, not with louder words, but with quieter awareness. Part 2. Stop seeking their validation. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from running or working too hard. It comes from constantly wondering if you're enough for someone who refuses to reassure you. It comes from adjusting your tone, your timing, your truth, just to be accepted. It comes from the invisible weight of living for someone else's approval. And if you've ever felt that, if you've ever found yourself chasing someone's validation like it was oxygen, you already know how heavy that burden really is. Let me say this clearly. You do not need anyone's validation to be valuable. Read that again, because the moment you start seeking someone else's approval as your source of peace, you've already handed them the power to disrupt it. And people sense that. They can feel when your confidence hinges on their compliments. They can tell when you're waiting for permission to believe in yourself. And the cruel irony? The more you seek it, the less they tend to give it. Stoicism reminds us to return to our center, to the part of us that is unmoved by praise or criticism. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because growth doesn't require applause. Alignment doesn't require recognition, and your worth does not require confirmation from someone who doesn't even see you clearly. I've lived through this trap. I've stood in front of people who only saw pieces of me. And I worked tirelessly to prove I was more. I wanted them to see my intentions, my effort, my value, but it never landed, because the truth is, you can't convince someone who isn't ready to understand. And the more you perform, the more you disappear, until one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself, not because you're lost, but because you've been edited. Seeking validation doesn't just weaken your relationships, it fractures your identity. It trains you to look outward when life is trying to pull you inward. It makes you a mirror, reflecting other people's moods, preferences, and opinions, instead of being a lighthouse that stands firm, even when the waves crash. So what do you do instead? You start with awareness. You notice when your words are shaped to win approval, rather than to speak your truth. You catch yourself checking for their reaction before you decide how to feel. And then you pause. You ask, what do I know about myself? Regardless of how they respond. And that's where the power begins to return. Because true self-respect doesn't come from being validated. It comes from living in a way that no longer requires it. You start making decisions based on what aligns, not what impresses. You stop chasing reactions and start standing in conviction. And little by little, their silence, their indifference, their failure to validate you, stops mattering so much. The next time you find yourself waiting for someone's approval, remember this: their opinion is not your compass. Their praise is not your fuel. And their attention is not your air. You were whole before they looked your way. You remain whole even when they turn away. You don't need to be seen to be solid. You don't need to be liked to be worthy. You just need to know who you are when the applause dies down and the room is quiet. Because that's when your true foundation is revealed, not in what others reflect back, but in what you've already chosen to believe about yourself. Part 3. Refuse to play their game. Some people don't need to raise their voice to control you. They don't need to be aggressive to gain the upper hand. Instead, they play a quieter game, one made of withdrawal, delay, inconsistency. They leave your message on read. They respond just enough to keep you hopeful, but never enough to give you clarity. They lean in when you start to pull away, then disappear the moment you get close. And before you know it, you're stuck, caught in a cycle where you're no longer acting from your truth, but reacting to their behavior. Let's call it what it is: a game. A game designed to keep you uncertain, off balance, hungry for emotional breadcrumbs. It's not love, it's not connection, it's power. And the more you try to figure it out, to decode the silence, to read between the lines, the deeper you fall into the trap. Because that's exactly how the game works. It keeps you engaged. Not through consistency, but through confusion. Stoicism teaches us to see through illusion, to act with intention, not reaction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. And in these moments, that strength looks like walking away from the game entirely. Not out of spite, not to manipulate back, but because your peace is too expensive to gamble on someone else's strategy. I remember the exact moment I realized I was in someone else's game. Every conversation felt like a test. Every pause in communication made me anxious. I started doubting my words, my timing, even my presence. And when I finally stepped back and asked myself, why am I feeling this way? The answer was sobering. I had stopped living by my values and started living by their responses. Here's the shift. You do not have to play. You don't have to mirror their silence. You don't have to chase their attention. You don't have to match their unpredictability just to prove you're strong. True strength is choosing stillness over strategy. It's saying, I see the game, I understand the rules, and I refuse to participate. Because the person who plays games isn't seeking love or connection, they're seeking control. And when you step out of that dynamic, they lose their grip, not because you fought back, but because you stopped showing up for the performance. You don't owe anyone your confusion. You don't owe them your energy just because they've made themselves scarce. And you definitely don't owe them your peace in exchange for their chaos. So the next time someone's inconsistency starts pulling you in, pause, take a breath, and remember, you are not here to be toyed with. You are not here to compete for attention. You are not here to decipher mixed signals like a puzzle. You are here to live clearly, move calmly, and love with depth. And if someone can't meet you at that level, then they don't get to have you on theirs. Walk away not as punishment, but as liberation. Refuse to play, not because you're weak, but because you finally understand that your life is too sacred to be someone else's game board. Part 4. Elevate yourself in silence. There comes a point when words are no longer necessary. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what needs to be said can only be proven through how you live. When someone overlooks your worth, dismisses your presence, or treats your consistency like background noise, the most powerful thing you can do is not argue, not plead, not explain, but evolve. Quietly, privately, steadily. Because silence is not weakness when it's paired with intention. It becomes strength, it becomes transformation, and it becomes undeniable. The world teaches us to respond, to defend, to show them what they missed. But Stoicism reminds us, you don't have to prove anything to those who chose not to see you in the first place. Their inability to recognize your value says nothing about the depth of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And those words, simple and steady, offer a path forward when you're tempted to react. I remember seasons in my life where I was so desperate to be understood that I explained myself to exhaustion. I sent long messages. I replayed conversations in my head. I tried to fix what was never broken, myself, in hopes that they'd finally get it. But they didn't, and they wouldn't, because some people don't respond to clarity. They respond to convenience. And when your truth becomes inconvenient to their narrative, they tune out. So I got quiet, not out of defeat, but out of decision. I stopped chasing closure and started chasing growth. I poured my energy into building the version of myself that no longer needed their understanding to feel whole. And that's when everything changed, not because they came back, but because I moved forward in a way that didn't leave space for them anymore. Elevation doesn't need to announce itself. It just shows up, in your presence, in your peace, in the way you no longer react to old triggers or reach for empty hands. You stop needing the apology. You stop needing the conversation. You stop needing them to see it, because you see it. You see your growth. You feel it in your discipline, your boundaries, your rising standards. There's something sacred about silent transformation, about healing without posting, about succeeding without proving, about glowing up for your own soul, not for their regret. And when you elevate quietly, something remarkable happens. You become undeniable, not through noise, but through the way your energy speaks before you ever open your mouth. So the next time you feel tempted to explain your worth to someone who overlooked it, pause, choose silence, and choose movement. Let your absence speak. Let your alignment speak louder. Let your growth become the answer they never earned but now have no choice but to witness from a distance. You don't have to out-talk them. You just have to outgrow the version of you that needed them. Because when you elevate yourself in silence, the people who once ignored your light won't be able to look away when it shines from within. Part 5. Master your emotions. If there's one skill that sets you apart in a world addicted to reaction, it's emotional mastery. Not suppression, not pretending, but the ability to feel everything fully, and still choose how you respond. Because the truth is, people will test you, they'll ignore you, provoke you, disappoint you, they'll play games with your time, your heart, your mind, and the moment you react out of emotion instead of intention, they win, not because they're right, but because they've pulled you off center. You see, emotional self-control is not about being cold. It's about being clear. It's the discipline to pause when everything in you wants to fire back. It's the wisdom to walk away when your ego screams for revenge. It's the strength to sit with the discomfort, to observe the heat rising in your chest, and still say, I choose peace. The Stoics were never about being numb. They were about being unshakable. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And those aren't just words, they're a call to reclaim your power. Because the second you allow someone else to dictate your emotional state, you've given them a kind of control they didn't earn and don't deserve. I've had moments where I let people pull me into emotional chaos, where a comment, a glance, a silence would send me spinning. And afterward, I'd sit there, exhausted, regretful, not because of what they did, but because of how I gave them access to my peace. That's when I realized, emotional reactions are expensive, and the price is always your clarity. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being ruled by every feeling. You begin to notice the triggers. You feel the sting, and instead of striking back, you breathe. You step outside of yourself for a moment and ask, what outcome do I actually want here? That simple question can save relationships. It can protect your dignity. It can change the entire course of a moment that once would have destroyed your day. It's easy to lash out. It's easy to send the angry text, to raise your voice, to match their immaturity with your own. But what's hard, what's powerful, is choosing stillness. Choosing the higher road not because it's easier, but because it protects the life you're building. And nothing derails progress faster than a reactive spirit. So how do you build this mastery? Practice. Practice in the small moments. When someone cuts you off in traffic. When a friend makes a passive-aggressive comment. When you're misunderstood and want so badly to defend yourself. These are your reps. These are the moments where you train your nervous system to stay steady instead of spiraling. Because the person who can master their emotions in the heat of conflict will always be the strongest one in the room. Not the loudest, not the most intimidating, but the calmest, the clearest, the most unbothered, not because they don't care, but because they care too much about their peace to hand it over that easily. So the next time someone tries to pull you into drama, pause. Don't let their storm become your climate. Breathe, think, and choose the response that protects your energy, not the one that proves your point. Because in a world full of noise, the one who remains still becomes magnetic. And that stillness? That's not weakness. That's self-respect in motion. Part 5. Master your emotions. If there's one skill that sets you apart in a world addicted to reaction, it's emotional mastery. Not suppression, not pretending, but the ability to feel everything fully, and still choose how you respond. Because the truth is, people will test you, they'll ignore you, provoke you, disappoint you, they'll play games with your time, your heart, your mind, and the moment you react out of emotion instead of intention, they win, not because they're right, but because they've pulled you off center. You see, emotional self-control is not about being cold. It's about being clear. It's the discipline to pause when everything in you wants to fire back. It's the wisdom to walk away when your ego screams for revenge. It's the strength to sit with the discomfort, to observe the heat rising in your chest, and still say, I choose peace. The Stoics were never about being numb. They were about being unshakable. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And those aren't just words, they're a call to reclaim your power. Because the second you allow someone else to dictate your emotional state, You've given them a kind of control they didn't earn and don't deserve. I've had moments where I let people pull me into emotional chaos, where a comment, a glance, a silence would send me spinning. And afterward, I'd sit there, exhausted, regretful, not because of what they did, but because of how I gave them access to my peace. That's when I realized, emotional reactions are expensive, and the price is always your clarity. Mastering your emotions doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being ruled by every feeling. You begin to notice the triggers. You feel the sting, and instead of striking back, you breathe. You step outside of yourself for a moment and ask, what outcome do I actually want here? That simple question can save relationships. It can protect your dignity. It can change the entire course of a moment that once would have destroyed your day. It's easy to lash out. It's easy to send the angry text, to raise your voice, to match their immaturity with your own. But what's hard, what's powerful, is choosing stillness. Choosing the higher road not because it's easier, but because it protects the life you're building. And nothing derails progress faster than a reactive spirit. So how do you build this mastery? Practice. Practice in the small moments. When someone cuts you off in traffic. When a friend makes a passive-aggressive comment. When you're misunderstood and want so badly to defend yourself. These are your reps. These are the moments where you train your nervous system to stay steady instead of spiraling. Because the person who can master their emotions in the heat of conflict will always be the strongest one in the room. Not the loudest, not the most intimidating, but the calmest, the clearest, the most unbothered, not because they don't care, but because they care too much about their peace to hand it over that easily. So the next time someone tries to pull you into drama, pause. Don't let their storm become your climate. Breathe, think, and choose the response that protects your energy, not the one that proves your point. Because in a world full of noise, the one who remains still becomes magnetic. And that stillness? That's not weakness. That's self-respect in motion. Part 7. Expand your circle of influence. When someone ignores your worth, it's easy to shrink, to isolate, to believe the lie that maybe you are too much or not enough. And in that lonely space, you start to question your value, not because it disappeared, but because you've spent too long around people who never recognized it in the first place. That's why one of the most powerful steps you can take after walking away from the wrong people is to open your life to better ones. Not just anyone, not just noise, but people who see you clearly, without distortion. People who mirror back your highest self, not your wounds. People who don't require you to shrink or filter yourself just to feel safe in the room. These people exist, but first, you have to make space for them by letting go of the ones who never deserved your loyalty to begin with. Stoic philosophy teaches us to control what we can, and that includes who we allow close. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But I'd take that one step further. Your soul becomes dyed with the company you keep. Your environment shapes your energy. And if your circle is small but toxic, your thoughts, your confidence, your vision, begin to wither without you even realizing it. I've lived through seasons where I felt stuck, not because I lacked ability or potential, but because I was surrounded by people who couldn't, or wouldn't, believe in me. They wanted the old version of me. The one that made them comfortable, predictable, controllable. And when I started to grow, to change, to raise my standards, they pulled away. At first, I panicked. I thought I was losing everything. But in reality, I was gaining something far more valuable, space. And into that space came new energy, new voices, new mirrors, people who didn't flinch at my boundaries, who didn't compete with my progress, who didn't make me feel guilty for evolving. These weren't perfect people, but they were present, and that presence created safety. Not safety in the form of comfort, but safety in the form of truth. In knowing I could be fully myself and still be welcomed, challenged, and respected. Expanding your circle doesn't mean collecting more faces. It means curating your environment like your life depends on it, because in many ways, it does. Energy is contagious. If you surround yourself with those who doubt themselves, diminish others, and play small, you'll start doing the same. But when you sit with those who embody strength, clarity, peace, it elevates you in ways that no amount of self-help books ever could. So how do you begin? Start by asking, who makes me feel lighter after I leave them? Who challenges me to grow without shaming me? Who celebrates my wins without comparison? These are the people worth leaning into. The ones who ask how you're really doing, not just when they need something. The ones who make you feel like your presence is a gift, not an obligation. And if you haven't found them yet, don't settle. It's better to stand alone in truth than to sit among crowds that distort your reflection. Because when you expand your circle with intention, you expand your future. You multiply your vision. You amplify your voice. You stop asking for a seat at the wrong table and start building your own. The next time you feel tempted to go back to people who only tolerated you, remember, you're not difficult to love, you were just in the wrong room. The world is filled with quiet, grounded, growth-minded people just like you. But you won't find them if you keep orbiting the wrong ones out of fear. Choose people who don't just want you around, but want to grow with you. Because in the right circle, your worth won't need to be explained. It'll be recognized the moment you walk in. Part 8. Redefine your energy and time. When someone ignores your worth, it's not just your feelings that get affected, it's your energy. Your time, your focus. You start pouring into dead spaces, into conversations that go nowhere, into people who reply in half sentences and show up only when it's convenient. And little by little, without even noticing it, you begin investing your most precious resources into someone who isn't investing back. That's the real cost of being overlooked. Not just emotional bruises, but the hours you'll never get back. The mental load, the days you spent waiting for a message, a call, a moment that never came. And here's the truth. Time spent in uncertainty is the most expensive time of all, because it robs you not only of action, but of peace. Stoic philosophy teaches us to treat time and energy as sacred. Seneca once said, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy." And yet how often do we give our time to those who don't deserve it? How often do we rearrange our schedule, our priorities, even our values, just to accommodate someone who wouldn't do the same for us? I've done it. I've cleared entire evenings just to be available for someone who ended up canceling last minute. I've stayed in draining conversations just to avoid the discomfort of silence. I've said yes to things my spirit clearly said no to, just to maintain a connection that wasn't really a connection at all. And every time I did that, I lost something, not just the time, but a little more of myself. But then I started asking a different question, not, do they like me, but, do they respect my time? Do they value my presence? Because when someone respects your time, you don't have to explain why you're busy. You don't have to feel guilty for protecting your schedule. You don't have to apologize for choosing rest over being their emotional dumping ground. Redefining your energy and time starts with a shift in mindset. You are not available on demand. Your presence is not a background service that runs 24/7. Your energy is a currency, and not everyone gets unlimited access to it. You begin to realize that, "I'm not available," is a complete sentence. That, "no," is not rude, it's responsible. That choosing your peace over their chaos is not selfish, it's self-aware. And once you begin protecting your time like it matters, something profound happens. People start showing up differently, or they start leaving, and either way, you win. Because now you're no longer operating from obligation. You're operating from clarity. So the next time you find yourself overextending, over-explaining, over-giving, pause. Ask yourself, would I invest this much time and energy into someone who treated me the way this person does? If the answer is no, it's time to reset. Time to create boundaries, not walls, but filters. Because not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Some people are meant to sit in the balcony. And some, they were never meant to be in the theater at all. You get one life. One energy source. One clock that keeps ticking whether they notice your worth or not. Spend it wisely. Spend it intentionally. And spend it on people and pursuits that give back what you give out. Because your energy isn't infinite, but it is yours. And when you reclaim it, you reclaim yourself. Part 9. Don't let their silence create your story. There's a special kind of pain that doesn't come from words, it comes from the absence of them. From the unanswered text, the missed call, the lack of closure, the long pauses that stretch into days, then weeks, and suddenly, you're left in a silence that says everything, yet explains nothing, and in that silence, your mind gets loud. It fills in the blanks with every insecurity you've ever had. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I didn't say enough. Maybe I ruined everything. But here's the truth. Their silence is not your story. It's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to explain what they refused to communicate. Stoic philosophy reminds us that while we cannot control others, we can always control our narrative. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And this includes the story you tell yourself when someone goes quiet. When they leave you in the dark, you get to decide whether to sit in confusion or to stand in clarity. I know how easy it is to spiral. I've done it. I've overanalyzed the silence of people I cared about, replayed every conversation in my mind like a crime scene, looking for the moment I lost them. But what I learned, after exhausting myself emotionally, is that sometimes silence isn't about you at all. It's about them, their avoidance, their emotional immaturity, their fear of confrontation, their inability to honor what they started. And when you let someone's silence define your worth, you hand them the pen to your self-image. You allow their indecision to become your self-doubt. And that's a chapter you never need to write. Here's the shift. Instead of asking, "Why did they go silent?" ask, "Why am I still waiting for noise to feel whole?" Instead of filling in the gaps with blame, fill them with truth. Your truth. The truth that you showed up. That you were honest. That you brought your full self to the table. And if that wasn't enough for them to stay, it says nothing about your value. It only says everything about their capacity. You see, when someone ghosts you, disappears, or withdraws without explanation, that is their story to carry, not yours. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to decode it. You don't even have to understand it. You just have to make peace with it. Because waiting for closure from someone who couldn't even offer communication is a form of self-abandonment. You deserve better. You deserve responses. You deserve clarity. But more than that, you deserve to be in relationships where silence doesn't feel like punishment, but like peace. So the next time someone's silence starts to write the narrative in your head, pause, breathe, take the pen back, choose a story that's rooted in your strength, not in their absence. Remind yourself, I am not what they failed to say. I am not what they didn't choose. You are not the blank space they left behind. You are the author of what comes next. And when you own that truth, their silence becomes just that, silence. Not a story, not your identity, just noise that no longer needs to be explained. Part 10. Be the one who outgrows, not outreacts. When someone ignores your worth, the first impulse is often emotional, to react, to prove, to defend. You want them to feel what you felt, to see what they overlooked, to regret what they let go. And maybe that urge burns hot for a while. You picture yourself saying the perfect thing, making them realize their mistake, forcing them to finally understand your value. But here's the deeper truth. When you react, you're still orbiting their energy. You're still letting them shape your story. The Stoics taught us something radically different. They taught us not to react, but to rise, not to win the argument, but to win our peace. Because true power isn't found in the loud clapback, it's found in quiet growth. It's not in the revenge post or the passive-aggressive silence. It's in the way you keep becoming, long after they stopped paying attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And I'll take that further, the best closure is outgrowing the need for it. The best redemption is peace. The best comeback is not needing one. I've spent years learning this the hard way. I used to be addicted to reaction. I'd over-explain. I'd confront. I'd stay in conversations long past their expiration just to get the last word. But every time, I walked away drained, because even when I won, I lost a piece of myself. I was still stuck in their story, still tethered to their validation. But something changed when I stopped trying to outreact and started choosing to outgrow. When I stopped seeking to be understood, and instead became someone who understood myself. I shifted my focus inward, built new routines, nurtured new circles, said yes to what aligned, and affirmed no to what drained. And without theatrics, without big announcements, I left behind every version of me that needed to fight for love in rooms that never wanted to listen. That's the essence of outgrowing. It's not loud, it's not even visible at first, but it's steady, quiet, deep. You stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. You stop defending your boundaries and start living them unapologetically. You stop reacting to what's beneath you and start rising into what's meant for you. And people will notice, maybe not right away, maybe not out loud, but they'll feel it, the difference in your presence, the weight in your silence, the clarity in your absence. And if they ever circle back, don't be surprised, but don't be shaken either. Because by then, you'll have grown so far beyond needing their recognition that even their return won't impress you. So the next time you feel the urge to react, to prove, to perform, to pull them into the emotional ring, pause. Ask yourself, do I want revenge, or do I want peace? Because you don't need to scream your worth to be heard. You don't need to chase justice to restore your power. You just need to keep evolving. Outgrow their games, outgrow their silence, outgrow the version of you who needed them to realize what they never will. Because when you stop reacting, you start remembering who you are. And in that stillness, in that dignity, in that quiet refusal to match chaos with chaos, you become untouchable. Thank you for listening. This has been the Chill Stoic, where we don't just speak from strength. We live from it. If this series helped you remember your worth, return to your peace, or reconnect with your power, then it did what it was meant to do. Until next time, stay calm, stay grounded, and stay stoic.